Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mavis and Me. Today I want to talk about something that I see on YouTube channels sometimes where people are walking around with service dogs, usually in training, and the dogs seem kind of nervous. Their tails are sort of flattened or tight. Their eyes look kind of scared. Their ears are flat or pulled back. They kind of tippy-toe around. And I want to talk about, mostly, is that good for the dog? I understand that people are stuck using the dog that's sitting in front of them. Owner, handler, trainers, we can't just go, nope, this one won't work. Let me just switch it out and get a new one. It's not super easy to do that. And so we kind of work with the dog that we have. However, I just want to make sure that people understand that that is maybe not a good idea for the dog's best interest because stress can create a lot of problems. So I'm going to be reading most of this on my computer because I wrote a lot of it so I wouldn't forget anything, and then I wanted to read some some quotes out of some articles that I found. So sorry that I'll be kind of looking over here and not looking over here at you, but I want to make sure that I don't mess anything up or skip anything that I think is important. Okay, so let's talk about stress. Stress is the body's way of dealing with something uncertain, be it surprise or fear, excitement or sadness. It affects the chemicals in our bodies and in our brains. Dogs experience stress too, and service dogs are exposed to stressful situations on a daily basis. So why is stress important? A dog that struggles to manage stress is most likely a poor candidate for service work. Most of the handlers that I see considering washing their service dogs is because the dog is fearful or anxious out in public. Is this something that can be fixed? And is it even fair to force a nervous dog to work in public access situations? So the first article that I'm going to quote was I found it on healthypets.com, healthypets.mercola.com, and it's the title of the article is Proven Ways to Calm Your Dog from Storms, Separation, Anxiety, and Other Phobias. And I didn't quote a whole bunch out of this article, but I did quote this. A chronic, prolonged fear response can cause both physical and emotional disease in your pet that can potentially shorten its life and negatively impact quality of life. Chronic stress depresses the immune system, alters blood flow to vital organs, and triggers the development of compulsive behaviors. Signs of a fear-based reaction in your dog include crying or whining, hiding, inappropriate elimination, looking away, ears held back, pacing, shaking, and vigilance. And vigilance means that the dog is overly aware of its situation, like kind of staring and looking, and everything is making it kind of react. Depending on your dog's anxiety trigger, he may also engage in destructive behavior or self-harm, and that would be dogs that maybe lick their feet raw or chew the hair off of their tail or their legs or their flanks, that kind of thing. So let's talk about different types of stress now. And this next part of this I got from, let me scroll down so I can quote properly, hemopet.org, and the article was How Does Stress Affect a Dog's Long-Term Health? So, types of stress. Okay, there's generally considered to be two types of stress. One is acute and one is chronic. By definition, acute is like your fight or flight syndrome. It lasts for a very short period of time and increases generally just the blood pressure and the heart rate. That's when you're just scared, and it's like suddenly your heart shoots up. You're ready to run or fight, right? That's acute stress. And of course, that happens to our service dogs on a daily basis, and that's sort of expected that, maybe somebody drops something or, kind of bumps them with a cart maybe, or, a little kid goes screaming by, right? That would be maybe like an acute stress. It's sudden and then it's kind of over. Okay, chronic stress is a slower response to a stressor that manifests within several minutes to days after the initial activation. Increase in hormones such as glucocorticoids, cortisol, and corticosterone, which can negatively affect metabolism and immune function, as well as potentially impact thyroid function. So those are the two types of stress, acute and chronic. Now we talk about physiological stress and psychogenic stress. So physiological stress is basically due to trauma, such as surgery, vaccinations, hormonal changes, systemic illness, and shock. Okay, these are basically things that happen to the dog suddenly, koosh, and the dog gets stressed because of it. Then there's psychogenic stress. And this is probably what most of us suffer from as well. And this is how the body responds to emotional or mental stressors. Examples like separation anxiety, fear of thunderstorms and strangers, and even good things like reunions with something or someone special. In terms of psychogenic stress, the concern is that these emotional or mental stressors, if ongoing, could manifest into physical illness. So how do we measure stress? One study, and I found this interesting even though it doesn't really apply probably to most service dogs, but I mean maybe it does, but the idea is it's a way to measure stress. One study simulated a thunderstorm in a home setting. Saliva samples were collected to measure cortisol levels before, as well as 20 minutes and 40 minutes after the exposure. During the thunderstorm, dogs presented classic signs of fear such as pacing, whining, or hiding. Their cortisol levels increased 207% and were still elevated 40 minutes after the loud noise. Researchers also discovered that the dogs that lived with other dogs had less of a reaction and recovered to baseline more rapidly. Dr. Nancy Dreschel of Pennsylvania State University surveyed 721 companion dog parents whose dogs had passed away and found that if a dog was considered well-behaved by the pet parent, that positively correlated with lifespan. So those dogs generally live longer. So if your dog is well-behaved and seems kind of content and you feel like it's a good dog, there's a chance your dog will actually live longer. Dogs with extreme non-social fear and separation anxiety were found to have increased severity and frequency of skin disorders. Makes sense. They're stressed, they're nervous, they're anxious, right? So they're more likely to start licking and chewing on themselves. And I thought this one was really important for service dog handlers who have a service dog in training that, she just doesn't like people. This is something you want to take note of here. Fear of strangers was found to be related to a significantly shortened lifespan. So keep that in mind when you're maybe pushing a dog out to be a service dog and you're working really hard on this dog who has a strong fear of people, of strangers, that one, you may not get past it, and two, if the dog still finds that a stressful situation every time you're out in public, you're taking time off your dog's life. I don't know how much because they can't really quantify that. The next article that I found is kind of along on the same lines, and it was from Applied Animal Behavior Science, and the article was called "The Effects of Fear and Anxiety on Health and Lifespan in Pet Dogs." And it found there's evidence to suggest that the stress of living with a fear or anxiety disorder can have negative effects on health and lifespan in the domestic dog. So what does this all mean? Basically what it means is that it's easier to start out with a dog that is confident and stable in public situations right from the get-go, right? Starting with a dog that's nervous or anxious is much more likely to end poorly. Solutions to stress? Well, the best one is simple: avoidance. By removing your dog from the stressful situation, you reduce his stress response. Keeping him from encountering these stressful situations in the future will help him avoid that future stress response. So basically, keeping your dog out of the public is the best way to make sure that your fearful dog lives a long and happy life. Okay, so avoidance is the easiest and the most, effective way to work on this stress problem. Your only other option is desensitization and counter-conditioning, which is behavior modification. This is a lengthy process, best done by a professional behaviorist. It's difficult to accomplish because, depending on what your dog stresses over, controlling the situation for desensitization can be nearly impossible. An example would be if your dog were anxious about, say, men with beards. Okay, you could set up the best scenario for tiny steps towards progress with lots and lots of food rewards and encouragement, but if some guy with a beard just walks right up to your dog and pats it on the head or tries to pat it on the head, everything you worked for could be ruined. Sometimes you just can't control the environment that you train in, so making progress can be difficult, if not impossible. Now, having said all this, I will admit that Mavis, when I started out, was very suspicious of people. The breed, it's not uncommon in the breed to be kind of alert and watchful of strangers, not necessarily trusting of them. So I kind of set myself behind a rock there when I started, but I knew that I needed a working dog, and a Boerboel was the breed that I thought was most interesting for me to use. I did a lot of work with teaching her to be tolerant of people and to trust that I wasn't going to just let random people walk up and pet her. And what it basically boiled down to, as a puppy, I tried my best to socialize her with strangers, and at some point she was done. She didn't want to be messed with by people, and so now she knows that it's more of a trick to be pet. She still doesn't really like people messing with her, but she knows that if I tell her stand, say hi, she'll let people walk and basically politely pet her on the head and pet down her back. And for the most part, she just stares at me like waiting for the release word, okay, where she can come over and get a treat or get rewards from me, verbal rewards. And that works pretty good. I found that she's not super stressed out about it anymore. Her ears don't go back. She doesn't get that slinky look. Her tail doesn't flatten out because she sees it as an opportunity to earn a treat. And so I've kind of counter-conditioned her response to it into something that she, I'm not going to say looks forward to, but doesn't reel back from anymore. So it can be done. However, I, have quite a bit of training in behavior modification with dogs and have had dogs for years and trained dogs for decades. So I've, learned a lot of things along the way. So, if you have a dog at home that you're thinking of maybe making your service dog, these things are important to consider because it needs to be a two-way street. You need to benefit from the dog, but the dog should also benefit from its work. And if your dog doesn't like it and your dog is stressed, you're just shortening its lifespan. And that doesn't seem fair to me. And there's plenty of dogs out there that want to work and want to go out and do these things and would take joy in being at your side 24/7 out in public. So, keep these things in mind. I don't want to discourage anybody from working with the dog that they have, but just be realistic. If you're not a professional dog trainer and you don't understand dog behavior, trying to take a dog that's anxious and nervous out in public where it's going to run into the thing that bothers it the most, which is usually people. Usually most anxious dogs are anxious because of the people. You're just going to end up finding yourself in a situation where your dog, can't do its job for you, or you end up where it actually bites somebody because it's afraid. It, has a fear biting reaction when someone reaches down suddenly or something like that. So keep these things in mind and let me know what you think. Leave some comments down in the comment section below. Feel free to subscribe, ring whatever the bell is that everybody says, ring my bell. I don't know what that means, but go ahead and ring it if you know what it means. And I look forward to seeing you next time. All right, talk to you later. Bye.